well, I'm Andrea Patchett. I was born Andrea Bibby in 1960, and my children are Leela, Aurora, and Adom Patchett. And Leela was born in 1977, Aura in 1981, and Adom in 1988. And our family is basically at this point, with most of our seniors dead, it's just us. Okay, February the 10th, it's my 61st birthday, and, you know, birthdays at this point just are becoming just another day. I don't celebrate my birthday in any way. Oh, in fact, I've already had a birthday, well, I've had a few birthday wishes already today from friends, but hang on. I have a birthday wish from an old friend, Bill, and this is the first time he's actually wished me a happy birthday. It's taken him 10 years to do it. So he says, "Happy birthday, any big plans? Reno's all done." And I've responded back, "Thanks, Bill. Still working on renos, and my big plans are to complete the living room by the end of the week." And he responded, "No fun." And I sent back, "Well, that's entirely dependent on your idea of fun." So, yeah, so that's what I'm doing. So, and yes, I'm sure I'll be talking to Leela and Aurora. Okay, so I think I talked about this the last time I was recorded, but I don't know if that recording was a good enough quality. So basically what got me into midwifery was, well, probably it was something that was sitting there in the background all the time, because I do recall as a very young child, like at 8, 9 years of age, being very interested in articles that I would read while sitting at the dentist's office, for example, on birth. And I was always fascinated. And it was after the birth of my first child, who I'd hoped to find somebody to help assist me with a home birth. That didn't happen, so she was born in the hospital, and it was a very disappointing experience. Not because of her, I was delighted with her, but it was disappointing in that I felt like that wasn't anything extraordinary. That was a assembly line kind of system that they had going, and only to be confirmed by talking to other women not years later, but within that next year, talking to women about their birth experiences, and they had different feelings about their own birth experiences. But as I listened to them, I thought, this is like, there's a real issue here, because these all sound exactly the same. They were managed, induced, drugged, forceps were used. It's like it was one after the other, and they didn't look any different. Each one was the same. And I just thought, something's not right here, and I can do something about this. For myself, at least, I thought. So I began to think, okay, I'm never having a birth like that again. Anyway, as I had already talked about in our last recording, I talked about holding La Leche League meetings at my home. And I did that because about 5 weeks after my daughter was born, and I still had very, very painful, cracked, bleeding nipples, and was ready to give up breastfeeding, I went to La Leche League, which is a self-help group founded by women who were trying to learn about what's normal in breastfeeding, because we were at that point in our civilization in North America where breastfeeding was almost unheard of. And most women didn't last more than a couple of weeks breastfeeding their newborns. And I just thought something's really wrong with this, and I was determined to be able to breastfeed. So I hosted these meetings, and at that one of my meetings, a woman came for her first meeting. She was pregnant with her first child, and as we went around and introduced ourselves, she said, well, I'm planning a home birth with a midwife. And I was so like intrigued. It's like, oh my God, you found a midwife? Like, who did you find? And you're going to have you're planning a home birth. So I latched onto her after the meeting and asked her everything I could think of. And she turned me onto a book called Spiritual Midwifery by Ina May Gaskin, which I immediately went out and purchased. I didn't borrow it. I purchased it. And there was no looking back after that. It's like I knew at that point, not only would my next child be born at home, but I thought, I'm going to become a midwife. It was one of those pivotal points in life where it honestly felt like a light bulb had turned on, that I knew what I was going to do, which was become a midwife. So at that point, I began looking into how do I become a midwife. And of course, at that point, that would have been 1978. And in Canada, there had never been any kind of legislation around midwives. Midwives didn't exist for the most. Well, they just other than being what we'd call a lay midwife. We called them lay midwives then. Now you'd call them a traditional midwife. And there were there was a handful of them in Canada. Canada's a big country. So I just looked into what would it take, and the first thing I started to do that I thought that I could do was become a childbirth educator. So I found this company called Informed Home Birth, and that was founded by Rahima Baldwin. She eventually changed the name to Informed Birth and Parenting because the stigma around home birth was so enormous that it seemed more feasible to call it Informed Birth and Parenting, because then it whether you were planning a birth at home or in the hospital, it was at least going to be informed, because most women were giving birth without any kind of information other than the typical obstetrician saying, don't you worry your pretty little head about anything, I'll take care of it all. And that was a very, very typical comment coming from an obstetrician back in those days. And it was really insulting to a lot of us and frustrating. It's like, first off, how dare you say my pretty little head? It's like, you don't get to say that. And you're going to take care of everything? It's like, without my consent, without any kind of input from me. And this is the most profound experience in my life. It's about my body and my child, and that's your attitude about it? So, yeah, no thanks. And it just, all these things just prompted me to keep pursuing this career, because I thought there has to be a better way to have a baby. We are designed to be able to give birth. We if we're healthy enough, we get pregnant easily, and birth is just such a profound human experience, not just for the mother, but for the entire family, but particularly for the woman who is going to do this, because only the woman can actually give birth. Nobody else can. And for her to share it with others is just really a generous thing to do. And really what she needs to do is surround herself with only those supportive people, which is not always easy to find, even within family. When I announced to my family that, well, I'm going to have a home birth when I was pregnant with my second. Why on earth would you want to do that? Including my own mother, who had delivered 2 of us at home in Britain, me included, because that was the normal thing. Why on earth would you want to do that when you don't have to? It's like, well, I do want to, because I actually want to experience birth. I want to do it under my own terms. I want to do it in a healthy environment rather than a hospital where sick people gather. And I want to allow my body to do the work that it's created to do without interference from other people who think, no, it should go this way. Like, I am not interested in what other people think I should have. I'm interested in only those people who are willing to support my desire for this normal birth experience, while also having some education around, well, if things aren't going normally, how do we identify that, and what do we do about it? So, yeah, it just, over the next year and a half, I think, I got my certification as a childbirth educator. And I'm trying to recall now. I think I got that before I gave birth to my second child. So I am pretty sure that Aurora had been born before I became a certified childbirth educator. And during that process of becoming the childbirth certified educator, I became more involved with Rahima Baldwin and informed birth and parenting. And then she asked me if I would be interested in becoming one of the trainers, so for other women wanting to become a childbirth educator. And of course I was very interested. So I ended up traveling to Detroit, Michigan, and stayed with her and her family while I did this training with her and some of her colleagues. And it's funny, it's only funny to those of us in the know, but one of the educators at the time was Anne Fry, who, anybody in the midwifery world in North America knows exactly who Anne Fry is. She became a published author on childbirth issues, mostly on interpreting lab work for midwives who had no access to education, because there still was no regulation. There was still no access for us to go into school and take any courses. Everything was self-taught. And Anne Fry wrote one of the first books for midwives, which was a book about interpreting your lab works. so that you could help women go through their labs to say, okay, this is what this means, this is what this means. Because, of course, you know, women would have her blood work done, and the doctor would say, oh, yeah, your blood work came back and it's fine. Or your blood work came back and you're low in iron, so we're going to put you on an iron supplement. They never, ever talk to them about, okay, this is how low it is, or this is how, or it's just borderline low. It was never any kind of discussion. It's just, it's low, we're going to put you on iron. They didn't talk to them about any other aspect of their blood work that might be indicating a problem that might be coming up that actually could have been dealt with prior to the problem actually coming to fruition. But they didn't talk to them about it. It's just, no, suddenly one day they'd come in for an appointment and they'd say, well, your blood work's not good, and your blood pressure's not good, so now we're going to do this, and we're going to induce your labor. And I mean, really, it was just, it's like, what? And why did you not even mention that things weren't looking great? And it was always, how do they do this? How do they get away with this? But that was normal practice. In fact, it's still fairly normal practice even to this day. It's pretty shameful. Because women should be informed all along about what is going on with their pregnancy and their health, and it should not be just pushed off to, oh, we'll talk about that at another appointment, especially when the woman has concerns and wants to talk about it. Oh, no, we'll talk about that another day. No. When the woman's ready to talk about it, the woman should be able to talk about it. Anyway, we're really talking about my journey into midwifery. So yeah, I became the certified childbirth educator. I became a trainer for women wanting to become a certified childbirth educator. And then my second child was born, and she was born at home after a lot of kerfuffle, because it turns out that I conceived twins with her, and I lost one of the twins early on in the pregnancy, before I even knew I had twins. And the only reason I found out I had twins is because my doctor kept saying, how far along do you think you are? And I'd tell him I knew exactly when I'd conceived. And he said, yeah, you're mistaken. He said, this is much further along. And then one day I started to bleed very, very heavily and ended up in emergency. And then they hospitalized me because they couldn't figure out what was going on. All they knew was I was bleeding badly. And my doctor came in to see me, I think the following morning after being admitted, and again said the same thing. He says, okay, so how far along do you think you are? Because he said, this feels like a 20-week pregnancy, and I was about 12 weeks. So, and as soon as he said that, I just suddenly thought, I'll bet this is twins. And they did schedule me for an ultrasound, which was the early days of doing ultrasounds. They scheduled me for an ultrasound. And while I was in there having that done, I said to the technician, I said, would you look for twins? Because my doctor keeps saying that I'm much further along than I think I am. And I know I'm not. And anyway, she did kind of say to me, she said, I'm not allowed to say anything, but yeah, I do see a second sac here. So she basically said, yeah, I think that you are pregnant with twins. And then my doctor came in to me the day after to tell me about the results from the ultrasound, only to tell me that it looks like it was twins. One has not survived. And we're going to keep you in for a little longer, because I was still bleeding at the time, and they still really didn't know what the heck to do with me. So that was that. And of course, each time I had any kind of interaction with the medical system around my pregnancies, I learned stuff. And I just thought, they really they really do not communicate with the women that they are supposedly caring for. And that was troubling to me. Anyway, I finally got home and carried on with my pregnancy with just one baby and tried to decide how I was going to have this baby, because I had been determined to have a home birth. And then now everybody's nervous because, well, we don't know what the effects are going to be of you having lost this twin. And everybody again was nervous. And it wasn't until, I think I was due in the next 5 weeks. And the doctor I had been seeing said, it was an obstetrician, and he said, well, I'm going on vacation, so this guy's going to take care of you while I'm gone. And it's like, what? It's like, I've had no contact with this doctor. My baby's due shortly. I was very unhappy. So I came home and struggled with my feelings and what was I going to do. And it's so, again, interesting. At the time, I came across this book called Immaculate Deception by Suzanne Arms. And once I read it, I thought to myself, I don't give a shit what's going on here or what other people's fears are. I am giving birth at home. And I found a midwife. Well, actually, I'd already found the midwife, and I just basically had said to her, I'm not going to the hospital. I'm going to give birth at home. And her stipulation was, well, you have to find a doctor who will support you. And oddly enough, I found this old guy. His name was Dr. Twitty. He was a senior. He was coming up to retirement, I think. But he had lots of experience doing home births. And I called, and he said, yeah, okay, come on in and see me at my office. So I went in to see him. And he said, okay, so you have a midwife? I said, yes, I have a midwife. He says, okay, that's good. He said, okay, no problem. Your pregnancy looks good. Everything seems fine. Yeah, okay, so you've lost a twin. Well, whatever. He didn't seem to be terribly worried about it. Anyway, and that's who I had. And when I went into labor, my midwife came, and when she thought it was time to call for the doctor to come, Dr. Twitty, he said, well, I'm just having my dinner, and I'll be along after I have that. And he was a good half an hour away. Anyway, he showed up just in time for the birth, and he was just so laid back about it. Oh, he was actually pretty good. And he even came out the next day after she was born just to check on me. Even knowing that I had a midwife coming as well, he still came. He just knocked on the door, came in, and just did his usual little, check my uterus, asked me a few questions, and then was on his way again. And I had my midwife caring for me as well, so that I had some support around the early days of breastfeeding, although that was an easy experience. That child breastfed well, and I didn't have the sore nipple issue that time. And that was, I was totally convinced after that, babies should be born. With healthy pregnancies, babies should be born at home. They have no business being born in the hospitals, in these filthy environments with people who are rushed off their feet and trained only to prepare for emergencies and have really no experience with normal birth, except for the babies that literally fall out of the mothers because they're just barely making it into the hospital as their baby's being delivered. And I went from there. My next step was I found a midwife in the Kitchener area and called her and said I'd really like to come and start gaining some experience. It was over an hour's drive for me one way to do that, but she said, okay, sure. And that was my next step, and I take my breastfeeding infant, who was at that time, well, I guess not so much an infant, but still under a year old. She was I think she was about 8 months old when I began going to clinics in the Kitchener area to meet pregnant women and see how prenatal care was conducted by a midwife. Yeah, so that was the next stage, and it just went from there. And within a few months of attending those clinics and meeting pregnant women, the women were inviting me to come to their births. So I came as basically a learner and observer, although I did help the midwife with certain tasks, but it wasn't formal. So, and I did that for the next, the next year, I think, before I officially became an apprentice midwife. And then that would be the start of my apprenticeship. So, and that's another chapter.